Hi and welcome to Tracklution Academy. In this video, Simo Ahava will show you how to install Tracklution tracking with a GTM template. Before you continue, please go to tracklution.com and create an account if you don't already have one. Now let's give the stage to Simo.
Hi there, I'm Simo Ahava from Simmer and I'm one of the developers of the Tracklution Google Tag Manager tag template. In this video, I'll show you how the template works. The video has 4 parts to it. We'll start with how to install the template in your Google Tag Manager container and how to create your first tag with it. In the second part, I'll show you how custom events and custom parameters work. In the third part, we'll talk about the all-important e-commerce tracking section of the template, and I'll show you how to integrate it with your Google Analytics 4 data layer. In the fourth part, I'll show you how the ContactInfo event works if you want to send first-party data to Tracklution. So let's get started. To install the template, we'll start with a Google Tag Manager web container and head on over to the templates section of the container. In templates, we can click search gallery for tag templates because we are working with a tag template and not a variable template here. So click search gallery. And the easiest way to find the Tracklution template is to use the search functionality. So here we can type Tracklution and you should see the result in the list. So click the official Tracklution template created by Tracklution and make sure it has the green verified checkmark so you know you're not working with an imposter. Make sure you read through the description and the permissions that the template wants to use, but I do want to tell you that this template works exactly the same as the standard installation method, so there's nothing surprising going on behind the scenes. And if you are curious about how the template actually works, you can always open it in the template editor to see the code that's running within. Once ready, click Add to Workspace to make sure it's added to your container. So now you've added the template to your container and you still need to create a tag with it. So at this point, we're going to go into tags and we're going to click to create a new tag. First, click the tag configuration selector and here scroll down to find your Tracklution template. Make sure it has the gallery label attached to it so you'll know that it's the official template from the Google Tag Manager template gallery. This is what the tag looks like. We have some standard settings up here and then individual customizations can be found by clicking each section heading. Finally, we need to add a trigger to the tag. Now, the one thing every single Tracklution tag needs is a container ID. To find the container ID, head on over to your Tracklution dashboard. Here, click the installation button. And now you can choose the standard installation, for example. Scroll down. And within the script snippet, you can find your Tracklution container ID within this initialization command. So let's copy that without the quotes to the clipboard, and then back in Google Tag Manager, we can paste it into the container ID field. The biggest difference and the biggest benefit of the Tracklution template is that you don't need to fire a separate initialization call. The template automatically initializes your Tracklution pixel as long as you add the container ID, and you don't have to worry about multiple or duplicate initializations because each initialization is run just once per page per container ID. Let's keep page view as the event type, and then we're going to trigger this on the all pages trigger. Of course, if you are running a consent banner on your site, make sure that the Tracklution template fires appropriately when it comes to how your company or how your website observes different consent regulations. Let's give this a descriptive name, and once done, click Save. We can now enter preview mode for the tag template to make sure that it works. So we're going to hit preview here, open the website, and now the page has loaded. We can look at Tag Assistant, and we can find that the Tracklution page view has fired one time. So now when we go to the Tracklution dashboard for this particular container ID, we should see a timestamp of a few seconds ago because that's when the hit was sent. We can see that there was an event dispatched with the name page view. The next thing we want to do is fire a custom event. So let's create another Tracklution tag. Again, from tag configuration, we need to find the Tracklution template. Again, we need to copy paste the container ID into the respective field. And then we can choose an event. In this case, let's simulate a subscription event. So we're going to use this event name subscribe. And then if you want to add custom parameters, you can do so by adding them into this section with the heading custom parameters. So in this case, let's add a custom parameter. Let's call it source, and the value, let's set it to newsletter. Make sure you observe the vendor documentation, such as that provided by Meta or TikTok or LinkedIn, to know what kind of custom parameters you can send and what kind of values they should have. This is just for illustration purposes. We need to add a trigger to it. Let's simulate this, that the subscription happens on a DOM-ready event. So this is a page load event. You typically would have a subscription happen with an actual newsletter subscription, but we are just simulating a custom event in this case. Let's give it a descriptive name and then click Save to save the new tag. Now hit Preview to go to preview mode again. And once the site loads, you can check Tag Assistant again to see that both the Tracklution tags have fired at this point. And on the dashboard, we can hit the Reload button to refresh the list of events. We can expand this, and now we can see the second page view that we just sent by reloading the page and the subscription event that we also collected. You can also click the Raw button here to check what was collected with the subscription event. And here you can see that there was also a custom parameter with the name source and the value newsletter collected with the subscription event. Of course, I don't have any connectors added to this demo dashboard, but if you had connectors, you would see them firing with these events as well. Next, we're going to add e-commerce data to our event. So let's create a new tag. Choose Tracklution as the tag type and paste your container ID into the field. In this case, let's use a purchase event because that's typically the most important e-commerce event you can collect. Now, when you choose an e-commerce event name, you'll also need to add e-commerce parameters. And here we have a couple of options when you select the purchase event. First of all, you can choose to send e-commerce data. And now you have a couple of options again. If you have a valid Google Analytics 4 e-commerce data layer implemented on the site, you can simply check the GA4 data layer as the data source, and the tag will automatically map those values from the data layer to the outgoing request. So you don't need to do anything else. It will automatically find all the relevant fields from your GA4 data layer. You can also choose a variable that returns a valid Google Analytics 4 e-commerce object. So this is a handy option if you already have the e-commerce data available, but you need to map it to the GA4 format, or you need to remove or adjust something before you pass it to Tracklution. You can also choose a manual deployment where you add individual values one by one to the tag. So if you have a variable for transaction ID or for order value or for coupon and so on, you can add them here. If you want to add items, you can choose a variable that has to return an array of valid GA4 items. So the items array needs to be in the format that GA4 data layer prescribes. But in this case, let's simulate a GA4 data layer purchase. If it's a partial purchase, which you can read more about in Tracklution documentation, you can check this box here. We're going to call this Tracklution purchase, and we're going to add a custom event trigger for the purchase event to fire this tag. So whenever a data layer event with the name purchase is pushed to the data layer, this tag will fire and it will automatically collect the e-commerce data from the pushed data layer object. So let's save this. Let's preview the site. And here we have a simulated purchase event, which fired our Tracklution tag. And if you check the contents of the data layer push, it follows the GA4 instructions to the letter. So now when we go to the dashboard and reload it, we can see that a purchase event took place with a value of €1. That was the value of the transaction. Now if we click to see the raw data, so we have things like transaction ID, value, tax, shipping, and then we have individual items here as well. And these can all be consumed by the Tracklution connectors that you've built. Just to remember that if you don't have a valid GA4 data layer available, you can also use a variable as the data source, which needs to return an object in the correct format, but you can manipulate the object, for example, by using a custom JavaScript variable, or you can set the fields one by one using the manual option. The final thing I'll show you is how to send the all-important ContactInfo event, which collects first-party data about your visitors. So let's create a new tag choose Tracklution as the tag type again, paste our container ID, and then choose ContactInfo as the event name. When you choose ContactInfo, you'll see that all the other sections disappear and you'll only have this ContactInfo section available. And here you can add the individual values for the different bits of first-party data that you want to collect to Tracklution. You can send the values in plain text, so just type them here or have them returned by a variable without hashing. If you do so, Tracklution will collect them unhashed, so in plain text format. So it will be sent over the network in plain text format. And you can see it in the dashboard that the value is populated in plain text as well. But remember that Tracklution hashes these values before they are forwarded to connectors. So you will never have to worry about your first-party data leaking unhashed to the various marketing vendors. But Tracklution will be able to read it and it will store the values unhashed in their database. If you want, you can also send hashed values instead of plain text. So you can use an algorithm like SHA-256 to hash the value first before dispatching it to Tracklution. So here we'll replace the email address with a SHA-256 hash. Let's trigger this to fire as early as possible. So in the initialization event, for example, to make sure that all the other events that fire later will have the benefit of first-party data. And then we can name this and save the tag. Now when we hit preview, we can see that the ContactInfo tag has fired. And when we reload the dashboard, the hashed email address is now associated with the events collected from this user. The Tracklution tag template lets you do everything that the standard installation method allows you to do, except you're using an officially created Google Tag Manager template, which reduces the risk of typos or errors or data leaks coming from a botched implementation. Just make sure that you observe the documentation and read it carefully, in addition to reading the connector documentation carefully as well, because you need to know what values to send to Tracklution so that vendors can make the most out of it. Enjoy tagging your site with the Tracklution custom tag template available now in the community template gallery for Google Tag Manager.